Hey everyone, Zandrous here, and welcome to an episode of Zandrous Reviews. Today's episode is on the newly released Star Trek Beyond. This is the third film in the Abrams timeline, the reboot timeline, I guess you could call it. Well, I'm going to give you my thoughts on it, the good, the bad, and my overall general feel for the movie. This is going to be a spoiler-free section, so don't worry, I'm not going to ruin anything here, but there will be a spoiler section later on and a separate video, so be ready for that. So, yeah, let's get into it. Okay, I'm just going to say this part up front. I liked this movie. I had fun. And I think that is the best thing to say about this movie, is that it was a fun adventure. I know a lot of people go into this, wanting to see a really cerebral thing from Star Trek. And while I understand that, this is more of the TNG kind of crowd. And I love TNG, which is a lot less action, and it was more, the politics and the stances on maybe spirituality or just the weird unknowns of the universe. And that's great. That is definitely Star Trek. This was more of your TOS kind of Deep Space Nine kind of thing for me, where it was about the action and character focus. Which again was TNG as well, was character focused, but this focused more on action and on some suspense a little bit. I will say there wasn't a whole lot of suspense. There was a little bit of a mystery, I'll give it that. And there was some suspense, but I never really felt like any of the main characters were in danger because, of course, character shields. plot shields. So I wasn't expecting anyone to die as far as the main cast, so I didn't fear for their lives. But that's just kind of a thing when it comes to Star Trek. You usually don't fear for the lives of your crew. As far as the main ones, it's the secondary characters that you have to worry about usually, about them kind of biting the dust, which does happen a little bit in this movie. But overall, when it comes to this movie, it was definitely more of a Roddenberry TOS era kind of feel to it, and I think that's a good thing, since that's kind of the focus of this movie, is an alternate version of that era of TOS. In fact, according to this movie, this is about halfway through their 5-year mission, just under 3 years, which is roughly about the amount of time that the original series had, which was 3 seasons, around 3 years. So it was kind of appropriate the way they kind of went about this. So I know that people have seen the trailers, so what I'm about to say won't surprise anybody, but we get to see the destruction of the Enterprise in this. I mean, you see it in the beginning in the trailer, so this isn't a really big spoiler, but the Enterprise does once again get destroyed. Now, it kind of fell out of the sky in the last movie, Into Darkness, and I didn't know what they were doing. I guess what they did was just repaired it and sent it back out, which is fine, I guess. Though I'm surprised. But in this one, the Enterprise gets the shit beat out of it. What happens is there's this swarm of ships that are all connected, kind of like a hive mind, and they're attacking the Enterprise, and they're going through in force through the ship, bouncing on through the hull, puncturing it, and other parts of them, or other ones of them, are actually burrowing into the hull of the Enterprise and inside her troops, and they start coming out. So this is some weird invasion angle with this destruction. The reason that the Enterprise is even there is they received a distress call. I mean, that's the best way I can really call it. It was a person in an escape pod saying, their ship was captured, and from this alien woman, I don't know what race she was supposed to be. They never really said, but she says, I need help here. My ship's been taken in this uncharted planet. So they go through this nebula that has been extremely difficult to traverse before, and they've managed to map their way through and they get to this planet, and they get ambushed. So during the ambush, you're going to see these things going through and destroying the pylons that connect the actual warp engines to the ship, and you see them float away. So they don't have warp speed anymore, and they're restricted on impulse. And you get to see something, for the first time in what's essentially the TOS era of the timelines, and that's saucer separation. They never did that before. They actually did a saucer separation in this, which was kind of cool. The last time we had actually seen saucer separation was actually Star Trek Generations, I believe, where the Enterprise D's saucer actually separated and then crashed on the planet. And this is very similar to that in a lot of ways. This is kind of a callback to the Generations Enterprise D destruction, except it kind of didn't self-destruct in the background like the last time. It's just kind of torn apart and left floating in space. The parts that don't get fully blasted apart by just the sheer amount of bombardment it gets. So it was really handled well, I think. Visually, this movie is fantastic. The CG work for the majority of the movie is great. It's very eye-catching. It looks beautiful and streamlined, and that's kind of what you expect from Star Trek. So I enjoyed just watching the destruction of the Enterprise. It's not going to affect me anywhere near as much as watching the original ship actually get destroyed back in Star Trek 3. So I'm not going to have that same. I don't have that same attachment to this Enterprise, but it is similar enough that you kind of care. So I mean, if you've never watched Star Trek and this is for like the newer generation that just started watching Star Trek with these new movies, then they're going to care. They're going to care. Me, I think it looked nice, and that's really all I can ask for. And then watching the saucer section actually, go down onto the planet below and just like crashing through like mountain areas and slamming into the ground. It looked nice. It didn't drag as far as the Enterprise D's saucer section did, but still, that's fine, I think. That's where our movie kind of picks up, and this is just the first act. But while the space stuff is cool, that's not the focus of this movie. The focus is on the characters. And I think that was the best choice in this. So even before we get to, the ship being destroyed, we have some conflict going with the characters. So we're going to back a little bit up. I wanted to get the Enterprise destruction out of the way and just kind of describe the action that leads into the second and third part of the movie, to the second and third act. And want to bring it back to the first part, the first act, because this is where the story begins and it centers around the rest of it. It's not really centered around the destruction of the Enterprise. So even me just kind of mentioning the Enterprise in a passing way like I'm doing now, the movie kind of does too, and it doesn't focus on the Enterprise being destroyed all that much. And in fact, you don't even really have Kirk as upset about it as he kind of was with Star Trek 3. Kirk in this timeline doesn't have the strong attachment to the Enterprise like he did. It's to the crew, for sure, and his own ideals and sense of adventure, but it's not to the ship itself. And I think that's an interesting take on the Kirk character. It's a very different version of the character that we've, gotten to know, for 50 years at this point. So I appreciated that this didn't focus on him losing the ship as being the issue. It was his own views of where his place is in the universe. He's starting to feel like everything's, the day-to-day thing over and over again. They even kind of joke that it's kind of becoming episodic, which I like that little joke. And it's the kind of mundane aspects that are kind of getting to him. So he's, dealing with those kind of personal issues, self-doubt, and, is he, worthy of what his father did? He's, still caught up in what his father did for him and his mother and the other people on the Kelvin from the first movie. And that inner conflict is what kind of builds around Kirk in this movie. Spock is dealing with his own personal issues with the destruction of Vulcan in the first movie, and trying to deal with his place in the universe too, and dealing with the future of the Vulcan species. And that kind of creates some issues between him and Uhura, and they have their on-screen romance still kind of working through things, and it's having some problems now too. And there's just so much going on, even around those two main things. There's other stuff going on around them, and it's all these other characters, these little pieces. You have Sulu and his family, and with his, I'm assuming husband, it could be boyfriend, I'm not really sure, they're probably married, but Sulu is his husband, which I'm going to assume here, and their daughter. And you have that kind of thing going here, and you've got Chekhov being Chekhov, being fun-loving, and you've got Bones being kind of surly and concerned about James Kirk, and he's always been like that with the characters in the TOS era with DeForest Kelly and William Shatner. That rapport was always there, and it's definitely here still with Urban and Pine. They have their characters down, and you can still feel that chemistry. It's almost the same as it was with DeForest Kelly and Shatner. And I think that is brilliantly captured in this movie with those two. But what's captured more is Bones and Spock's dynamic. They were hands down my favorite part of this movie. Just watching the two of them once they get separated after they crash land, and it focuses more on a little bit more on what's going on through Spock's mind and what he's doing, because he's also dealing with the death of Ambassador Spock. Since this is how the movie's writing out Leonard Nimoy's part in the universe, and it's done in a passing way, but not in a disregarding way. In fact, that death weighs heavily on Spock, and how he wants to live his life like that Spock. And he's conflicted with his own mortality and the mortality of the Vulcan race and his own emotions, and it's everything kind of all a big ball of confusion and worry and dread, and it really helps to see that. And then you have Bones here and that dynamic there, and seeing how all that gets brought to the surface with Spock, and just watching these two banter and try to survive. And it was an enjoyable time. I love watching the two of them. The main three, Spock, McCoy, and Kirk, as always, are the central part of the cast and are just fantastic. My favorite parts of the movie. Uhura gets a really nice little arc in this. They've done a great job with the Uhura character between these three movies, and really expanding her beyond just the communications officer. She's not just the comms officer. She is getting out in the field and doing things. In fact, she actually goes down to help with the saucer separation when Kirk's in hand-to-hand combat at this point, trying to get the separation to go with the main bad. And we'll get to him in a little bit, I promise. And she goes down, and she pretty much gets herself left behind with the bad guys going through the saucer separation. She went down there to make sure it happened. So Uhura's very much proactive in this. She kicks ass in this movie, literally, and she's definitely a very competent member of the crew and deserving of her position in the story and on the crew on the bridge. I really like the way they've evolved her character in this iteration. So kudos there. And of course, Montgomery Scott. If we're going to talk about the other character that got a lot of time to shine in this movie, it's going to be Simon Pegg's Montgomery Scott. And as always, I love Simon Pegg, and I love his Scotty. It's so enjoyable. He actually gets to do a lot of screen time alone, as well as with the new character in this movie. So he ends up meeting the new character, Jayla, and she's kind of a scavenger on the planet where they crash land. You've seen her in the trailers. Just this pale kind of white alien with I don't know if it's like tattoos or it's just like a natural formation for her species, but it's just interesting watching these two work off each other, and they have a great rapport. They really do. I really enjoyed Jayla's character, and Jayla and Scotty work really well together, and I kind of hope she comes back, because it really gave a good foil for Scotty, because she's a lot like him. She can think out of the box, and she's self-taught in a lot of ways to deal with engineering stuff, which has plot points, for why that is to an extent for this movie. But what I just really enjoyed the focus Scotty got, and that he got his own interaction with a new unique character that is unique to this timeline. And it really helped flesh out Scotty a bit more. It helped, it really helped bring him more to the forefront. Because Scotty's another one of the big name characters from the original series. And they've done really well with his representation in this. Sulu and Chekhov, while, again, like I said earlier, they're good characters, they have their own little moments. They don't get as much focus in a lot of ways. They're there, they interact, they do things. You have a little bit more of a reason to care when it comes to Sulu because he's worried about his daughter. And he wants to get back to her and protect her because that's what a good father does. And while Sulu is involved with the things after the crew is captured and he's with Uhura, and you have Chekhov off with Kirk after everyone gets separated out because usually everybody's like in teams of 2. Throughout all of this, you have like Jaylen, Scotty, McCoy, Spock, Kirk and Chekhov, Sulu and Uhura. So everyone's in like teams of 2 at some point. And while Chekhov and Sulu have good lines in this movie and they're fun to watch, and again, still doing justice to their roles, there wasn't much for them to really focus on with these characters. Not a lot of like internal conflicts to deal with. And that isn't to say they're bad characters. Again, I enjoyed them. I really had no problem. I didn't have a problem with the casting before. I've never had a problem with their acting in the movies up to now. It just feels like they're secondary characters, which is kind of what they are in a way, but they just didn't really have much development. And that's extremely sad in the case of Chekhov because we're never going to get that due to the sad passing of Anton Yelchin about a month or so ago. It would have been nice to have had more Chekhov and have had a little bit more into his background. In fact, the last time we kind of hear him talking, he's flirting with an alien, so that is a bit amusing. But it is kind of sad that we didn't get more of Chekhov. So I don't know what they're going to do from here on out. If they're maybe going to recast him, this wouldn't be the first time that they've recast an actor in a movie. If they do going forward, since we know for sure there's going to be another movie. But maybe it might be good to let the character kind of rest and go off, do whatever. I don't know what they're going to do. We'll just have to wait and see. But maybe they'll give John Cho more to do in the next one, give Sulu a bit more character development. Because it's a character that has untapped potential. Who knows? We might even get to see him going away from this in the next movie to get to the Excelsior. We don't know what they're going to do with him or how this timeline is going to go from here. So, but I do hope to see more Sulu in the future. But every other character from the main cast were fantastic. Got good development, got great character moments, and it was just fun. Now with the bad guys, we have very few characters to focus on. I really don't know what the name of the alien race was. They didn't really identify themselves. Maybe they did and I missed it, but I don't think they did. But you have Idris Elba playing Kral, who is this alien, and he is basically the one that controls the ships that attack and destroy the Enterprise. It's a hive mind, and his ship controls it, and it goes to his whims, and his commands are all telepathically linked. And he brings down the Enterprise, and the reason he goes after the Enterprise was because of an item that was used in the opening scene of the movie that was supposed to be some kind of peace offering from another planet to another civilization, and they kept it on the ship and cataloged it after everything kind of fell through. And he attacks them. Kral attacks them to get this piece because it's a piece of an ancient weapon. And I guess he had the other part of the weapon, and he has a reason to use it, but he wants the other part of the weapon. But the plot basically revolves around Kral going after the Enterprise to get this item, this piece of a ancient weapon, and he wants to use it against the Federation. That is the plot, and everything that kind of just revolves around that. So I'm not going to go much farther into the plot beyond that, because that's going to start ruining a bit more. Kral as a character was okay as a villain, and they wanted to be menacing, and they wanted him to be, just unabashedly evil. I like the makeup work that they did with Idris Elba. I mean, it was well done, very well done. And while he has his moments of miss, just, I don't know, he felt kind of small scale in what he was wanting to do. While that seemed a big scale, just he himself and his motivations felt too small, too petty. And I didn't hate him. I didn't. I just felt that there have been stronger villains before him. And, you know, he's ruthless, sure, for the most part. And he's, you know, intimidating. And he's very much behind his own plans and believes that what he's doing is the right thing to do for his own cause. But even then, it's just, I don't know. It's okay, but I've seen way better plots. It's better than the last movie I saw. Is bad guy's motives and plan. So that's a plus. The bad guy in this movie is better than the bad guy in Ghostbusters. So that's something. It's a very low bar. So it's not much of something, but it's something. You don't really get to meet much more of the other aliens in this. I think there's no called Manus? Like, he's mentioned by name once, and I guess this specific guy in his group killed Jayla's father, and there's a personal thing there, but it's not brought up until, like, you know, the third act, and it just feels tacked on in a way. While the two of them have a great fight, it just kind of honestly goes unresolved. Yeah, you know, thinking about it, it really does go unresolved. So, I mean, was it really even a point to have that? They could have cut that out. I mean, just had it be a fight between her and, you know, just one member of his, you know, of his group. They didn't really need the whole "you killed my father, prepare to die" kind of thing. You know, it was kind of an Inigo Montoya kind of thing. But it doesn't get resolved at all. They fight and they escape. That's it. So yeah, I'll spoil that bit for you. But again, the fight was good. It just feels like a plot point that's just kind of, you know, they go, oh crap, we have to give her some kind of other motivation. Quick, done. Could have been handled better, way better. I mean, there's really not much else I can go into for character development or plot or anything else without really getting into spoilers. So I'm just going to shift around for a minute and discuss other things that I found positive about them. The sound design in this movie was fantastic. You know, from the sound effects going on with the ships, the explosions, the music, everything going on was very well done. Nothing was really distracting. The Beastie Boys a little bit distracting just because it's kind of a weird, it's not anachronism. It's just kind of a weird thing they put in there. While it does have plot reasons to exist here, and it does lead to some funny lines, it just kind of really stands out. Kind of like with First Contact, you know, and their choice of music for that movie. So it was kind of like that. It was kind of like the Cochrane playing music on the Phoenix. So yeah, it was a weird thing in there, but I didn't hate it. Even though I'm not a big Beastie Boys fan, I didn't hate it. So, you know, sound design was great. The musical score in this was superb, especially at the end where they're getting into the credits here, and you have the Final Frontier thing. You start hearing the classic tune that you always hear, like dun 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 dun, while they're circling around the ship and everything to go where no one goes before, and you know, they blast off into warp speed, and they actually start playing a slightly updated rendition of the classic TOS theme song rather than the TNG and Star Trek movie theme song that everyone's gotten used to over the years. It was the original, and it was really nice to hear that again. I grew up watching the original series. My dad introduced me to it, and so I grew up with, you know, Kirk, Spock, McCoy, Uhura, Scotty, all of them. I grew up with the original crew, and I grew up watching the original movies. And it wasn't until I got a little older that I started watching TNG, maybe around junior high or high school, that I really started watching the TNG stuff. And I mean, a lot of that was mostly done and out by the time I got into high school or junior high, because I was born in '87, and TNG was already going after I was born. Around the time I was born, it was already going. But I still watched TOS. And then throughout, as I got older, TNG and Deep Space Nine a little bit, Voyager a bit, Enterprise. So Star Trek is very much a part of my childhood. And watching this movie kind of made me feel like a kid again. And I think that was a good thing, because it brought back that feeling of watching, the old Rubber Suit Monsters, the kind of corny, cheesy music. They always kind of played the dun 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 dun, kind of like loud, bombastic music they would do for intense scenes. The characters, again, were indistinguishable from the TOS era, in my opinion. But this cast feels like the original cast. And that's no small feat. When I look at this cast, when they're in their roles, and they're going through this movie, and they're saying their lines, I'm not seeing Pine, I'm not seeing Quinto, I'm not seeing Saldana. I'm seeing Uhura, I'm seeing Spock, I'm seeing Kirk, I'm seeing McCoy. They have made these iconic characters their own. And while they have differences from the original cast, that essence of the characters are still there. And they've developed a little differently in this other timeline, but they're still the characters. They don't feel like they're just somebody playing these characters. They feel like these characters. And I have to applaud them for that. To get me to sit here and I'm chuckling and I'm laughing. Throughout this movie, there were many scenes that made me chuckle, that made me laugh, that, just made me smile, because I was watching a good Star Trek movie. And after Into Darkness, which, while not a horrible movie, was definitely subpar to me personally. It was a subpar rendition of Space Seed and Wrath of Khan. It was a subpar Star Trek story. And compared to the first one, I felt was weaker overall. Even if it did look good and did have Cumberbatch in it, it still did not exceed the first movie in this timeline's franchise. So, I enjoyed the first Abrams movie, and I liked Into Darkness. I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. I liked it. I feel this was far superior to Into Darkness. Beyond was definitely beyond my expectations. And it's right up there, I think, with the first movie of the trilogy, which is going to be not a trilogy anymore, but you know what I mean. In fact, I think this is actually going to be one of my favorite Trek movies overall. Wrath of Khan is still, I think, one of my favorite movies of all time. I still enjoy going back and rewatching that one. I enjoy Undiscovered Country, if it is a bit weak, but it's still a good movie. First Contact is another one of my favorites. And then Star Trek 3 I enjoy, mostly because I just enjoy Christopher Lloyd. But Star Trek 3 was a pretty good movie. Not great, but good. I'm probably one of the few people that doesn't enjoy Voyage Home as much as others. It's okay, but I think Beyond reaches a point that it's comparable to some of the better movies in the franchise's history. And this is coming from a lifelong Star Trek fan and somebody who grew up watching the old crew. So while I'm not the most diehard fan, while I'm not an authority on Star Trek, I come into this movie and I look at it from the view of somebody who, as a child, watched the original 5-year mission, and somebody that watched these characters grow and develop and age, and the franchise grow and develop and age. And I've been through the good times and the bad times with it. And I think at this point we're seeing a bit of the good times come back. This is definitely a movie you should go see. Hands down. So, I don't know if I want to do a star rating like I did last time. I mainly did that because we had, a guest with me, and it was to have a differing opinion. But I might keep this star rating system. I don't know if you like it or not. Let me know down below. But I will give a rating on this one, and it will be once again out of 5 stars. So, for Star Trek Beyond, I'm going to give it 4 stars. Now, the reason I'm doing 4, again, is the great sound design, the great cinematography, which was so good in this. The special effects were really good in this. In fact, I liked the starbase you get to see where all this is kind of basing around. The first and third act, based around the starbase. It was so well done. Such an interesting design, and it worked really well, and much like everything else in this movie, looked fantastic. And then you have the amazing cast, who did a great job with what they were given, and in fact brought a lot of these characters to life, including the new characters. Like I said, Jayla, I want her to come back. She was a fun character, she was enjoyable, she was very well acted, and I really hope that they keep her around and bring her back for the next movie. And again, Idris Elba, a great actor, and did a great job in this movie with his part. It was just a bit too weak of a part for me to really feel threatened by this bad guy. And while I do understand the thought process he went into for this plot line, for his plan, and while I did agree it was better than the most recent villain I had to deal with from that other movie, it just really kind of felt flat overall compared to other past Trek villains. So, really, it's the kind of weak plot in this kind of like second act that kind of brings down the movie a bit from a 5-star for me. And just some weird little plot things that kind of go nowhere or come out of nowhere that kind of made the overall narrative a bit weaker too. But it's a solid 4 for me. Definitely something I will be buying and will watch again. I recommend it. Go see it. And that's the end of the non-spoiler portion of this. So join me again in the next video for the spoiler section, which will not be nearly as long as the last one I did. So look forward to that. So until then, my name is Zandrous, and as always, stay awesome. See you in the spoilers.